Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 277 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Saturday Morning Spread. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Fun position, deep position in this draft. Position the Eagles need, as we'll talk about potentially. So, definitely one to keep tabbed away here.
Yeah, absolutely. We are on to the defensive side of the football. We have not covered all the offensive positions. Again, we're kind of jumping ahead, so we're not covering stuff the same time the Birds of the Round Table guys are, so you can sort of get a snapshot in time throughout the draft process. So we are on to edge rushers today, and we're going to work our way through the defense, and then we'll circle back to offense. But if you missed either of our first two episodes, we ranked the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL draft. Not particularly important for the Eagles. And we ranked the top 5 tight ends, which could potentially be very important for the Eagles. But we're on to another position that is important for the Eagles, and that is edge rusher. And so we're going to give our top 8 edge rushers today, expanding it a little bit because, as Mark said, this is a deep draft class, and there's a lot of guys that are going to go in the first round in the top 100 out of this draft. And so we're going to talk about a lot of those guys. It's also a position the Eagles could very well be targeting, and we'll talk about that along the way. And so we will give our rankings number 1 to number 8. Mark, I'll kick it over to you first. We both have the same number 1. Talk to me about him.
Yeah, Arvell Reese, which is also an interesting discussion because he's listed as a linebacker mostly when you go look at, PFF Mock Draft Simulator, things like that, a lot of tools that people use. And I get it because this guy played, he played 286 snaps in the box, and he played 327 snaps on the line, actually played 34 snaps in the slot, which is pretty funny. And in 2024, he took all of his snaps in the box. So I understand that this is a guy who played a lot of linebacker. He's 6'4", 241, 32.5-inch arms, ran an amazing 4.53, elite splits. He'll be just 20 years old on draft night. And like I said, even just playing 327 snaps on the line, he had 6.5 sacks last year with 10 tackles for loss, and then the 69 total tackles, which comes in a lot because of the work that he had in the box as a linebacker. Aggressive tackler, great range, does a great job finding the ball in run coverage. Great edge setter in the run game. He'll probably need to bulk up a little bit if he's going to be a full-time edge, if he wants to reach his full potential as a full-time edge at least. And I think that's what he's going to be. Presumably, this guy looks like he's going to be the number 2 pick to the Jets. It seems like all signs are trending that way. And I think if that's the case, you're using a number 2 pick on him. I don't think he's a guy who's going to split time or be a tweener. I think this is a situation, not that I'm saying he is these guys, but I think he's pretty close. But Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter, guys who didn't just play primarily at edge, played some off-ball linebacker, who I think now are pretty much just playing edge. I think that's going to be sort of the Arvell Reese story.
Yeah, I mean, you look at him and his metrics are crazy. 22.7% pressure rate, 6.7% sack rate. Both of those are going to just blow out of the water most of the rest of the numbers we'll give on this episode. However, he only rushed on 32% of passing downs last season. And so there's a volume factor to that as well. The biggest thing with him is, what is he going to be? What's his position? Is he a Mike? Is he going to be a Will? Is he an edge rusher? Is he something in between, some hybrid? And that's, once you start to get into those questions, it muddies a picture. And so if you think about a franchise like the Jets, who does a really good job, we talk about organizations that maximize their players. The Jets do a really good job of minimizing their players. And so when you look at a guy like this who maybe doesn't have a well-defined role, potentially going to a team like the Jets, that scares me a little bit for him, for his future. But I like him best as an overhang defender, I think. He's a 10 out of 10 when it comes to tools, but his development has lagged due to usage. He's only been a 2-year player at Ohio State. His usage has been a little bit of everywhere. And we've talked about with these guys before, do I think he can be an edge rusher? Yes. Do I think he could be an off-ball linebacker? Yes. But I think it's really important to give him a well-defined role early. If you ask this guy to be an overhang defender who drops into coverage, 60% of the time and rushes 40% of the time, that's going to not work out very well at the NFL level. And so I think if you're going to draft him at number 2 overall, you're going to use him as an edge rusher. Just make him an edge rusher early and let him get that down. And then if you want to start to do, that doesn't mean you can't drop him into coverage every once in a while, but if you want to truly make him a jack of all trades sort of player, at least wait until year 2, year 3, once we've got that first part down. So that's why I ended up putting him at edge rusher, is because I think he's going to get drafted really highly. I think that's the on-ramp people are going to use. But I wouldn't be surprised in a few years if this is a guy that we're seeing drop into coverage a decent amount of the time as well.
He flashes great coverage chops. He would be a great linebacker, in my opinion. I really do think that he should just be a full-time edge rusher. I do think if you plug him in there, the amount of athleticism he has, what we've seen in the limited, amount that we have seen him there, I think he has a chance to be an all-pro at that position and a chance to level up. And I think this draft, we've talked, I think a lot of people have talked about how this draft is maybe weaker and how it's a bad draft. I actually think that that's not necessarily the case in terms of the depth of the draft, but it's definitely the case in terms of the top of the draft and the top end talent, and the blue chip ratio of this draft, I would say, is pretty low. If you're looking at guys where you say who has kind of the highest chance of popping and becoming an all-pro, Arvell Reese absolutely has to be in that conversation and especially it's almost helped in that conversation by, like you said, the limited amount we've seen and the lack of development we've gotten to see at that position, because what we have seen in limited snaps is so tantalizing. 327 snaps, the metric Shane brought up, what you see on film, he jumps off the screen.
Yeah. All right. So that is Arvell Reese. Let's go to our number 2s. And we're a little different here. My number 2 is your number 3 and vice versa. So let's go with my number 2 first. I've got Rueben Bain Jr. out of Miami, Mr. T-Rex arms himself, and we'll get to it. But he was a 5-star recruit who stayed home and made an immediate impact as a true freshman. He's ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was an All-American in 2025 when he notched 9.5 sacks, 15.5 tackles for loss, and an interception for Miami. He's 6'2", which is 16th percentile, 263 pounds, 39th percentile, and 30 and 7/8 inch arms, which is only 7th percentile arm length. Okay, so he's 21 and a half years old. In 2025, I mentioned his sacks and his tackles for loss. He had a 15.2% pressure rate, 2.2% sack rate, and an 11.8% defensive stop rate. And so when we look at his strengths, I think he has excellent play strength. He's got the ability to collapse the pocket with a bull rush. He's got good size. I like that. I mean, he's on the shorter side, but 16th percentile height, 39th percentile weight. So he's well built and proportioned for his size. He's a strong edge setter in the run game. I think he anchors well and plays with good leverage. I think he can hold ground against combo blocks from offensive tackles and tight ends trying to work to the second level. He's got really good hand placement as a rusher. He's versatile in how you can use him, how you want to align him as an edge. And he's a high motor player. He does lack like the elite ankle flexion to just bend around the arc consistently. And when you're talking about a guy that's got such short arms, your margin for error starts to shrink. I do think he's still working on counter moves off his pass rush. It's worth mentioning he's very young. He's only going to be 21 and a half on draft night, but he needs to work on the timing of his hand strikes. And there's a lot of times I don't think he stays gapped out in the run game. He'll freelance a lot of times, and he does it with success, but he also gives up contain to running backs who are good at setting up defenders, and you're going to see more of that at the NFL level. And I also just don't think he has the most explosive step off the line. I think he wins more with power. And so the question with Bain, a lot of it comes down to the arm length conversation, that that we've been having. He's going to be off a lot of teams' draft boards just because of his arm length. I think it's he'll have the shortest arms for an edge rusher in the first round since 1999, is what I heard online. And so that's an issue. Now, there is a lot of, he's played with that and he's learned how to deal with that. And he was still a really impactful player at the collegiate level, but there's also an element of you're leveling up in competition. So it's always dangerous to bet on an outlier. And some of the measurables and things are kind of dumb. It's like, we're out on this receiver because he ran a 4.55 40. Maybe that doesn't matter as much. Arm length matters. It does matter for edge rushers. And so, I think it's fair for teams to have him falling down their board. And, we're going to find out. But it is a bet on an outlier. And I'm generally hesitant to do that.
I was surprised to see. I was expecting something. So something interesting here for people out there. I kind of start putting together my not my full big board, but I start kind of stacking positions and stacking guys around Thanksgiving. And when I really start diving in, and by Christmas, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm looking at, I start to have ideas of what ways Shane is going to go. And with the arm length thing, because Shane very much talks about outliers and not wanting to bet on outliers, I thought Shane was going to be out on Bain, but it surprised me when he sent over that he was Bain over Bailey. But the Bain thing is interesting. I mean, it almost feels like it's not worth talking about any of the conversation besides the arm length. Like, because you look at the film, you look at the stats, you look at the metrics, you look at the pass rush, you look at the run defense. That's a top 5 pick. I mean, that's a guy that it doesn't seem like the arms affect him as much as it should, or even at the college level. And I know that that's different at the NFL level, but if you told me that the guy had 32-inch arms or whatever would get him out of, the basement of, outlier range, and not even average, but below average, but not an outlier length arms. And you told me, like, here, go watch the film, I don't think I would question the arm length really. Once you know about it, you start looking for it and things like that. It's and another interesting thing out there, is it possible that, I know it's funny because it's a different position, but Will Campbell last year goes 4th overall and obviously really struggles down the stretch. And a lot of that was attributed to arm length. And I know different position, offensive tackle, but they're the ones blocking the defensive end. There's a reason that the arm length matters for one and the other. Do you think that kind of the Will Campbell thing let's say the Patriots lost in round 1 and he would have been fine or whatnot, a disaster, whatever. I don't know if the spotlight is shown on arm length necessarily for the tackle DN thing the way that it was nationally with Will Campbell.
I do think that there's an element of arm length being more important for offensive linemen or for tackles than it is for edge rushers, because the tackle doesn't get to pick how they block. They got to block whatever comes at them, where the edge rusher does get to pick the moves that they're going to throw. And I think there's moves, and I mean, some of Bain's go-to moves, his club move, his hump move, those don't magnify his arm length issues. They allow him to get in a little closer. In fact, you could maybe make an argument, and I've seen this argument made, that shorter arms are advantageous for those. And so he's a problem solver that's already figured out some of the issues there and how to negate them. And so I do think it's important. I do think it's more important for tackles than it is for the pass rushers, though, because they can kind of work around it better.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I wanted to flash this comp up there for another guy with kind of undesirable measurables. But even he had kind of a half-inch bigger arms, and people are saying that I guess percentage-wise did make a difference from Bain to Ingram in this comp. But there is definitely a lot of Melvin Ingram to Rueben Bain.
Yeah. All right, so that is Rueben Bain. Let's go to your number 2. He's number 3 for me. Talk to me about David Bailey.
David Bailey out of Texas Tech. I wanted to flash his comp up there. He's the only one I have it for because a lot of the guys don't have RAS scores yet. So I have to do it when I can here. And I think that this is a really good comp out there for David Bailey. Jared Verse. he had a 9.68 RAS, as you see if you're watching along on YouTube, to versus 9.64, within, pretty much the same height, pretty much the same weight, ran pretty similarly. The vertical was the exact same, the broad basically the exact same. And you watch him on film, and I do think that there's a lot of similarities between that last year reverse at Florida State and what we saw this year at Texas Tech for David Bailey. 15 sacks in 2025 with 19 and a half tackles for loss. I was looking at some pressures, just like overall, just like pressures as a stat. And you look at like different sites and it's totally different. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But no matter what you want to count it, he was second in the country in pressures. 7 sacks and 26 pressures allegedly in 2024 on basically half the snaps. His 39.5% win rate in true pass rush situations per PFF, which ranked 4th best among pass rushers. He's super twitched up, top tier burst. I think he's got a really good Euro step counter, excellent closing speed, and then a fun little stat: 8 forced fumbles, and you see why on film. He brings the boom, as the Costco guys would say. It may still need to bulk up. I feel like maybe I said that a couple times, but again, with him being 251, that is, 33rd percentile in terms of weight for defensive ends. He's another guy who I think in terms of being a 3-down guy, I think he has all the skills, but you probably want him to, put on 15 to 20 pounds of muscle in an NFL system.
22.5% pressure rate, 4% sack rate, 18.6% defensive stop rate this last season. I think the big thing with him is that explosive first step. And he stresses offensive tackles outside shoulders immediately off the line of scrimmage. He does that with snap timing, with that first step, with his acceleration. He's got good bend, and he's got good hands too. He's got an array of pass rush moves. When you get a guy that can threaten the edge like that, but also has good moves to the inside, you get 14 and a half sacks in 2025. And his 40 time was ridiculous, a 4.5 40. His broad jump was awesome. So he's an explosive player, and that's what you're banking on with him. I think he could struggle to be a 3-down player early in his career a little bit, which is important for a player that's drafted as high as he's going to be. But if you tell a team they can draft an explosive, productive pass rusher and they can try to figure out the run defense later, I think a lot of teams are going to sign up for that. So, I think he struggles even against tight ends sometimes in the run game. He'll try to work around them and get worked out of his gap. But I think that's just something you say, we'll figure that part out later. So I got a first round grade on him. I think he's going to fit best as like a wide 9 defender, or maybe you put him as a stand-up odd front pass rusher, but he's a guy that's going to go very high and for very good reason.
Yeah, he's a fringy top 10 guy for me.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. My number 4 is your number 6. It's Keldrick Falk out of Auburn. 4-star recruit.
Lives in Alabama.
Yeah. A 4-star recruit who played rotationally early as a freshman before taking a bigger role down the stretch. He broke out as a full-time starter in 2024 with 11 sacks. Then in 2025, he had 2 sacks. He had 7 sacks in 2024. I'm reading the tackles for loss column. Anyways, 11 tackles for loss, 7 sacks in 2024, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks in 2025. He is 6'6", 276 pounds. He's about 20 and a half years old, 9.5% pressure rate, 0.6% sack rate, 9.7% stop rate in 2025. He's got an elite size profile. He has a rare combination of mass and length that's going to allow him to play from a lot of defensive alignments. I mean, if you think about the guys we've already talked about, Falk is 6'6", 276. Bailey, 6'4", 251. Bain, 6'2", 263. Reese, 6'4", 241. So Falk is huge in a way these other guys aren't, and he's a very physical player because of that. He's a strong anchor in the run game to set the edge. He can deconstruct blocks really well. He's got a really good power rush that condenses the pocket. You don't want to run pullers at him. He attacks pullers and kind of shuts that down in the backfield. I will say, it's funny. We talk about I feel like I do this almost any time that one of my pros is the guy's size. One of my weaknesses is always his pad level. You're taller, your pad's going to come up. It gets a little easier to get under him and get forklifted over. And so I do think he can be out leveraged due to his pad level at times. His height works against him here, but it's not all size. There's some technique things he could do to get lower and kind of mitigate that. As with bigger guys, usually he has limited bend. And so that's going to reduce his ability to consistently win around the arc. And he doesn't have the most explosive first step. So he's kind of the anti Bailey, right? He's almost the opposite in every way. He doesn't have a lot of tools in the toolbox as a pass rusher yet. He is mostly going to try to bully you and push the pocket. And he lacks some of that lateral agility. So I think this is a guy that you want more in an odd front, as like an odd front 4-eye technique. I think you could play him in even fronts on the outside, and you maybe not as a wide 9 guy, but you're going to keep him tight to the line of scrimmage. You're maybe going to kick him inside on pass rush downs, but I do think he's got 3-down ability immediately, where that's a work in progress for some of these guys. He's just kind of the flip side of the coin. We're trying to work some of the pass rush things, and we're trusting the run defense is really solid out of the gate.
He's just when you say the bend, for me, there's like, he's such a limited bender. Like he's so clunky. He ran a couple of the drills, and people were tweeting it out, and he's such a clunky mover, and that makes me nervous. He's a great run defender. I don't think he's a good finisher in terms of pass rushing. But the size is so impressive that it's hard for me to. I thought I'd be totally out, and I don't. I have him as a 2nd-round grade for me, but he's still my edge 6 here, so I'm not too far behind. He reminds me a lot of Mykel Williams last year, who was a guy I was super out on, but I think there's more, and he went 11th, and I don't think it went well so far, but I think there's more with Falk just in terms of the 2024 tape than there was with Mykel. I think Falk's 2024 tape is more impressive than the 2025 tape to me. And I don't think you really had that with Mykel to lean on. So I do think that they're similar, but I do like Falk.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep rolling then. Mark, your number 4 is my number 8. Sorry, I actually think he's number 7. Yeah, my number 7. Talk to me about Akeem Mesidor.
Akeem Mesidor it's going to be one of the more interesting conversations, in my opinion, in this draft cycle. And he seems to be one of the more polarizing players. The one Discord that I'm in was in a big argument about him yesterday. 6'3", 259. He had 13 sacks and 50 pressures in 2025. He was top 8 in pressures, 4 sacks and 18 pressures back in 2024, and had 7 sacks all the way back in 2022. His 36% win rate in true pass rush situations ranked 9th best among edge players with 100-plus rushes. Really explosive first step. And I think a lot of people are concerned that, and we'll get to the age, but are concerned that this guy was just really old and was able to develop for a long time and was kind of then able to pick on guys much younger than him with athleticism, with strength. But I think he has more of a bag than he's given credit for. A really good Euro move. I think and then in the run game, I think there is reason to hope that he's a 3-down guy. Shows quick recognition of screens, really tough and physical against the run. But he did have a really high missed tackle rate in 2025. It was much lower in other years. The whole thing here is the age, though. He's a 6-year senior. He played 2 years at West Virginia and another 4 at Miami. He brings experience lining up at just about every spot on the defensive line. And in 2024, he played almost primarily inside. But with that experience comes a birth certificate, and that birth certificate says he's going to be 25 soon. So definitely an older prospect, definitely a guy that if you're drafting him, you think he's a right away year 1 guy who's contributing. Because if you're not, he's 26 at that point. So I think that the teams that make sense to draft Mesidor are the teams in that mid to late part of the first round who maybe they really need an edge rusher, or at least a guy who can be in a rotation with 2 other guys. And you're trying to compete right away. You're trying to get a guy who can plug and play. And I do think there is some plug and play with Mesidor.
Yeah, I mean, I think he can play all over the line, like you said. Set the edge in the run game. You can rush him from the interior. You could play him in multiple front alignments. my thing with guys like this always is he's going to be 25 on draft night, which isn't in and of itself a bad thing. I don't hate a guy. Like, it just depends about where you're at developmentally. Like, if Arvell Reese is 24, I'm saying he's just a raw player, and that's a problem at 24. At 20, we can deal with that. But the older you are, the closer you should be to your ceiling in terms of refinement and technique. But the thing for me with Messidor, what I'm always scared of is that 5th, 6th year breakout. He only topped 7 sacks once, and it was in his 6th college season. Now, that 7 sack season coming back in 2022, well, that makes you be like, okay, well, maybe, he was a good player back then. He's injured in 2023, hurt his foot. He's coming off of that in 2024. And so you can sort of sit here and explain that away, and you can say, he had 5 sacks as a true freshman in 2020. He had 4.5. Then he had 7. Like, we're following that trajectory where if in 2023 he hadn't gotten hurt and he would have had 12 sacks and come out, we would have been like, this guy's an awesome development profile. He gets hurt in 2023. He doesn't take that step in 2024. And then he breaks out in 2025 when he's, 4 years older than most of the guys he's playing against. And so it gives you pause. It makes him a really difficult evaluation. One thing I'll say from a negative on him is I think he ends up on the ground too frequently. He's got poor contact balance, and so he ends up on the ground a lot of times, and that's not ideal. I think he's a little overly reliant on his initial burst off the line and then power to win. And again, when I see you being a little underdeveloped in terms of your pass rush tools after your 6th college season, that concerns me.
What he is what he is, pretty much, I think.
Yeah. And so I'm with you. I put a 2nd round grade on him. And, I think if you're taking him in the early 2nd, he's probably going to be a good player at that position. He's just not a guy that I would love to be taking in the 1st. If you're like 30, 31, 32, then maybe if you just really need an edge rusher and that's what I think he's going to come in and be solid. He's going to be probably better as a rookie than some of these guys that I have above him, for sure.
Yeah.
It's just about, he's probably 98% of what he's ever going to be. And I think there's room for these other guys to grow, and that's where it starts to get tricky to project.
Yeah, I had him as a fringe top 20-ish guy. I initially had 23 first-round grades when I went through it, and he was one of them. And part of it is I'm going to discuss a guy up next who I have a 2nd-round grade on, and I'm kind of comparing them, and I'm like, do I really like Messidor that much more? There's part of me thinking that he probably ends up being one of my top-ranked 2nd-round grades, probably still within the top 25, but a technical 2nd.
Yeah. All right, let's keep rolling. We'll go to my number 5, a guy that is not in your top 8. It's Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M via Bowling Green. He was a 3-star recruit who barely played his first 2 years at Bowling Green. Before having a good year in 2023, he had 10.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks. Then he transferred to Texas A&M. In 2025 at Texas A&M, he had 14 tackles for loss, 11.5 sacks. He is 6'2", 253 pounds. He ran a 4.59 40. His date of birth, for some odd, you get this with a few prospects every year. His date of birth is ambiguous, so I'm not exactly sure how old he is, but he's going to be an older prospect because he was in college for 5 years. He had a 13.7% pressure rate, 4% sack rate, and 9.1% stop rate in 2025. So I think Howell has a quick first step. He can threaten tackles on the edge. He's got impressive movement skills. He's got good bend. He's your classic speed rusher type guy. He uses his arms well to keep blockers out of his chest so they can't latch onto him. He also does a good job of getting his hands up into passing lanes when he's not going to be there or be able to get home. High motor player. I think he shows the ability to convert speed to power, which is one of the most important things, I think, for a guy that's going to be good at bending the edge. I want you to also be able to transition into power and keep that offensive tackle off balance, and I think he can do that well, so he can push the pocket in. He's got some experience dropping into coverage. He did it 143 times over the last 2 seasons, and so if you're If you're a guy that likes to drop an edge rusher, Eagles fans know Fangio will often like blitz a linebacker and drop the backside edge. We've seen Nolan Smith, Jalex Hunt do that. You could do that with Cassius Howell. I do think he's struggles to anchor in the run game, though. Powerful tackles are able to display. They're able to displace him, push him back. And a lot of times he turns his shoulders when he goes to set an edge. And that's a problem because it just makes him easier to wash out. Typically, you want to stay squared up to the line of scrimmage so you can shed in either direction. And he tends to get those shoulders slanted. And so it makes it easier to really lock him down. That's a big issue, especially for a guy that's also got that weaker anchor. I don't think he has a reliable secondary pass rush move. We're either going to go run the arc or we're going speed to power. I'd like to see him develop some more of that. And again, he's a fifth-year player, so you would like to see that more well-refined. And he's got inconsistent pad level as well. So this is a guy that I think projects best into an odd front as like a stand-up linebacker. He's primarily going to be a pass rusher. I'm not going to call him a hybrid, but I do think he's a guy you can also drop at times. So that's where I was at on Cassius Howell. He was just outside your top 8, correct?
Yeah, he's 9 for me. He was a guy I was higher on earlier in the process. There's too many red flags for me. I'm at the point now where I have too many things that make me nervous, and he's not an outlier I'm willing to bet on. Because the arm length thing we talked about with Ruben Bain, his arms are significantly shorter than Ruben Bain's. They're like a half inch shorter. And Ruben Bain would be the first one since 1999, and Howell's are shorter. So, and then you combine that with him being, a player who played at Bowling Green for a while, and then finally had to switch and had a late breakout and an old prospect. And I just the lack of length and is the big thing for me. But enough other red flags have popped up that I've kind of dropped him precipitously. He was a guy I thought would be a first-round grade for me, to be honest, watching in college. But the more I've kind of dug in, the less I've liked.
All right, let's keep rolling then. Mark, talk to me. Who do you have at number 5?
This guy has the potential to be my guy for sure. Zion Young from Missouri, 6'6", 262. With 33-inch arms, 8 sacks with 32 hurries in 2025. He only had 3 sacks in 2024, but a similar pressure rate. Transfer from Michigan State to Missouri. His go-to move is his bull rush, which is lethal. He gets underneath the pads of opposing tackles, keeps churning, and sometimes will just shove the tackle into the quarterback, which is a classic like Reggie White move that you used to see back in the day. Also has a good cross chop move as well, and flashes a lot of potential on the interior as a rusher in sub packages. His quickness gives guards a lot of problems, especially at his size. Some people have doubts about his bend and ability to get around the edge, and they may think of him as a bit tweenerish, but this is a guy who I think jumps off the screen when I watch him. And there's part of me, we talked about, by the way, this is a tangent, but good job by the Ringer NFL Draft Guide listing him as 6'1". He is 6'6", only 5 inches off. And if we're shorting 5 inches off my height, I'm 5'1" all of a sudden, and 5'1". That's not good. I don't want to be 5'1". I don't want to be 5'6", but take 5 inches away. That's not fair. Anyway, I thought that was funny. This guy's huge. I mean, this guy is the prototypical size. There's part of me that was saying a little bit until Zion started to rise. He really killed us at the Senior Bowl and rose throughout the last couple weeks of the process. I was kind of saying, why, it's like McDonald's, but we have McDonald's at home.
Yeah.
We have Keldrick Falk at home. I kind of feel like with Zion Young, there's a chance that you can get a better player than Keldrick Falk, more refined than Keldrick Falk at a much lower value with the same kind of traits. So that was why I ended up bumping Young above Falk. But now seems like Zion Young's a first rounder. Seems like there's a lot of buzz that apparently New England is in love with him. Apparently San Fran really likes him as well, but apparently has a lot of fans out there. He was top 15 in pressures nationally and more of a power rusher at this point and needs to build out more moves. But I feel like the 1 or 2 moves that he does have worked really well.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
One thing I'll mention on him, I think he's a guy that interviews are going to be important with, because he was involved in a fight in the tunnel after a rivalry game as a freshman and pled guilty to misdemeanor assault charges. And if that's all, this is not a legal advice podcast.
To be fair, I'll just stand up. The fact that fight resulted in legal issues, in my opinion, is a joke. A fight in a football game should never be like legally punishable. I don't care that it happened in the tunnel. Let's be serious.
I remember years ago, like a guy taking his helmet off and using it as a club. I got no problem with that. That's not what happened here. To be clear, but I'm pushing back on that. It should never result in legal.
I guess never strong. But I remember at the time thinking Michigan was being very lame about how they were handling that. Personally,
yeah. And I was going to say, like, if that's the only thing that was there, then I probably wouldn't even mention it. But he was also arrested for a DWI and speeding in December of 2025 in the lead up to the bowl games. And so, you kind of bookend your college career with boneheaded decisions. And that's something that I'm sure teams are going to want to know about. So that's worth mentioning at least. But it sounds like I don't hear really much talk about that. It's just something that I wanted to note.
And I think he played in the bowl game that, like, he didn't have to. Everybody thought he was going to opt out, and he didn't play. And he had that, I think, legal trouble, and then still played anyway. He did get some people gave him credit for playing the bowl game that he didn't have to, because everybody opts out now. But another thing that I don't know if this is out there that public. I have some stuff now. I have a couple sources now that I can't reveal, but. There's some stuff out there with Cassius Howell in terms of drug-related, something that maybe happened in his past. Not an arrest. I don't want to get too much further into it than that.
All right, well, let's keep rolling then. Let's go to my number 6. He is your number 8. It's TJ Parker out of Clemson. TJ Parker was a 4-star recruit who contributed at Clemson as a freshman in 2023 and then became a full-time starter in 2024. Where he kind of broke out, 19.5 tackles for loss, 11 sacks. 2025 was a bit of a letdown statistically. Basically, those numbers got cut in half, from 19.5 tackles for loss down to 9.5, from 11 sacks down to 5. He is 6'4", 263 pounds, 33 and an 1/8 inch arms, so we check the arm box. 21.5 years old. I had a 12.7% pressure rate, 1.9% sack rate, and an 11.5% stop rate in 2025. When you watch him rush the passer, he's got really active hands. He's got the ability to disengage with blockers. He relentlessly pursues the ball with a high motor. I think he's got a strong upper body, and he's a physical edge setter in the run game. If you're going to run at him, if you're going to put him play side, he can set that edge and spill things back inside. He's a good backside pursuit guy. If the run's away from him, you leave him unblocked. He's going to pursue that to limit cutbacks. I think he gets off of the ball quickly, but he's not the twitchiest athlete. He did run a really good 40 time. He ran a 4.68 40, but I don't think you see him being the twitchiest guy on film. I have concerns about his athletic ceiling. He's not the most bendy pass rusher. And if you're going to win in a world where you're not the twitchiest, you need to be pretty technically refined. And I just don't think he's got well-defined pass rush plans. He often struggles to impact passing downs if that initial move stalls out. He'll get too upright, and the offensive line can out-leverage him. I think he's a little slow to recognize misdirection. And I don't think it's that he played worse in 2025, but I think teams paid more attention to him, and his production dropped, and he didn't have maybe the best answers. So I think he is a high floor 3-down player, but I think there's questionable upside there, maybe with TJ Parker. I don't think this is a guy. I don't think this is a guy you're going to draft that's going to be off your team in 2 years, but I also don't think he's a guy you're going to draft that's going to be a double-digit sack guy in 2 years either.
Yeah, limited range of outcome player, probably. And I guess defenders of his would probably point to his athleticism and say maybe there's some more potential than we're giving him credit for. But I'm right with you. And there's also some off the field stuff with him. And it feels like I hate doing that. I hate kind of talking about the off the field and injury stuff because it's just like we're guessing so much based on rumors. And I think so many of those rumors are, I don't know. It's always, I always like to try to keep it on the field. But DJ Parker, there was some stuff that last year at Clemson was a disaster. And it was a disastrous season from Clemson. They were a team expected to compete for a title that went like, I don't even know, 7-5. But it was a disastrous season. And I think there was a big moment on the sideline where Dabo was like yelling at him and he like basically just like walked away from Dabo and like wouldn't listen. And I think that like the defensive coordinator had to try to corral. It was a bad season at Clemson, so you don't want to punish the guy too much for being emotional and a bad loss or whatever the case may be. But there was some stuff out there that I think interviews probably matter for him as well.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep rolling. Let's see. We are I think it's your number 7, Mark. Who do you have at number 7?
Derek Moore. This is a fast riser, older prospect, senior, 23 years old. But he's a three-year contributor at Michigan, really productive. He had 10 sacks and 10.5 tackles for loss in 2025. He had 41 pressures and 3 pass deflections. Really does have a good knack for getting a hand up there, which is something I always like. 2 forced fumbles on the year. He was really, really good at just in terms of getting to the quarterback. 36% win rate, top 10 in true pass rush situations. I think he has really, really good burst off the line. I think the athleticism, it pops off the screen, active hands, his feet stay churning. He does not miss tackles. He has a big tackle radius. If you come near him, I feel like he's going to bring you down. I think he's an excellent run defender, excellent edge setter, and really good in run support. The problem right now with Derek Moore is that he doesn't have a ton of moves. He doesn't have a lot in terms of how to get around you. I think he's been really powerful and really good at being able to get through you. And I still think he's going to be able to do a lot of that. But I think at worst here, you're taking it. And it's funny. This is not usually the type of guy I love, but you're taking a swing that this guy's going to be an elite run defender. I do feel that way. And I also think that there is a lot to grab onto when it comes to the pass rushing, even though he hasn't shown a ton of ability to add a ton of moves to his bag. So it'll be interesting. I've kind of fallen in love with this guy as the process has went on. And it seems like he had issues finishing sacks in 2023 and 2024. He really took a step there in 2025 in terms of finishing plays.
All right. It's interesting that you're so high on him as a run defender, because I had down that I thought he was kind of inconsistent as a run defender and that Michigan took him off the field in some key run situations. So I might need to go back and look at that one again. But that was something I noted as a weakness for him, as I was a little concerned about the consistency in the run game there.
Yeah, I think that he's probably just a little too I'm surprised that he was I didn't know he was taken off the field a ton for that. I loved what I saw there. I haven't read a ton of scouting reports on Moore, so I don't know if I'm out on an island there. But pass rush in terms of the bull rush is unbelievable. I think he might be one of the best bull rushers in the class. There is
his speed to power is really nice too.
But I think you see that in the run game as well. But yeah, maybe I have to go back and look at that as well.
Yeah. We'll circle back.
Circle back.
I need to go look at him a little more now. It's not very often that you say something that I'm like, oh, I kind of thought totally different on that. So I'm gonna have to look back at that one.
Well, it's funny. I got in an argument similarly where someone in the Discord that I talk about a lot said they thought Mesidor was a dreadful run defender. I forget what the word. They were like, he's a terrible run defender. And I was like, isn't that kind of like part of the sell with Mesidor, is that he can be a 3-down guy? And like that one shocked me. So who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say dreadful on Mesidor. I think he struggles to get off a block sometimes, but I would take him as a run defender far more than Moore for sure. But anyways, yeah. Moore was not in my top 8 either. He was outside of that top 8. So I think is that all of our top 8s? I think we've covered everybody now. Okay, let's go Well, let's talk about the Eagles real quick, and we'll do an honorable mention too. But when you look at the Eagles and where the Eagles are at, obviously the big thing that's hanging out there is Jalen Phillips. Is Jalen Phillips going to be an Eagle in 2025? In 2025? Goodness. In 2026? I think he is going to get a big contract. Whether that's with the Eagles or not, I'm not sure. I kind of lean that Jalen Phillips is probably going to be playing elsewhere in 2026. What's your read on that?
I'm 50-50 on it. I don't have a good read. I feel like I have a worse read than ever this year. I feel like normally, and we talk about this, but normally I feel like with Eagles, you have a pretty good idea of how he's going to keep. He keeps his guys that make him look smart, I feel, most of the time, unless, situations like Milton Williams where it's just not going to be possible.
It made him look really smart.
Yeah, where you can't look too smart. But in terms of, I usually have a good feel for who he's going to keep. In terms of like this year and even some of the contracts coming due, I have no read right now on how, with like Jalen Phillips, with even Reed Blankenship to a less degree. I don't have a good read. And then like, is it going to be Morrow or Jordan Davis that they keep if they keep one of the two? Like I'm really more up in the air than I normally am with the Eagles all season.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see that if they keep Jalen Phillips, Nolan Smith, Jalex Hunt, that is a solid edge rushing trio. All of a sudden, if Jalen Phillips walks, I think Hunt and Smith are the only two guys they actually have under contract. Uche, Ojulari, Brandon Graham, Okoronkwo, they're all on expiring contracts as well. So, and even if you keep Jalen Phillips, and this is a little bit of my concern, he's been pretty injury prone over his career. You're going to need options there. And so I think, and of course it helps that the Eagles' philosophy is building through the trenches too. In a deep edge rusher class, Eagles are taking an edge rusher in this class. There's like no doubt in my mind that they're going to do that. Now, how early they'll do that is the question. But is there anybody that we didn't talk about yet that you like for the Eagles, or maybe you don't like him for the Eagles, but it's just a guy you wanted to shout out?
Yeah, a couple. These are, we talk about how Howie loves the rash chart guys, in terms of especially like day 2, day 3. But I feel like especially day 2. Like Howie loves to take those athletes on day 2. And the two top RAS guys are the two guys that I wanted to bring up, and they're two guys that'll be probably in my top 60 to 70. So they're not second round grades, but kind of right outside of that. One guy is Malachi Lawrence from UCF, 6'4", 253, 40-inch vertical. He ran a 4.52. 9.9 relative athletic score. And he actually compares really favorably to Josh Sweat as an athlete. Pretty similar athlete to Josh Sweat. Yeah, I think he also has been kind of a riser even before this process. He wasn't a guy who I really had my eyes on at all, to be honest with you, until he popped up a little bit before the combine as a guy rising up boards, but did have 7 sacks this year, 5 sacks the year before, 7.5 sacks. In 2023, has had 10.5, 6, and 11 tackles for loss. So 28 tackles for loss and 19.5 sacks over the last 3 years at UCF, combined with that athletic profile. I mean, this is a guy who I don't know if I had ever heard the name 3 weeks ago. I think there's a chance he goes top 40, top 50 now. So bravo to him for the way he's risen up the boards. And maybe if he doesn't go quite that high, maybe he's a guy Howie has his eyes on in the 2nd and 3rd round. Another guy I want to throw out there is Dennis Sutton. He was at Penn State. He actually had the best RAS in the class. I didn't mean to rhyme there, but with a 9.96 relative athletic score at or best RAS among the edge rushers. And this is a guy who really, really thrived in 2024. Coming out of 2024, people thought that this was a guy who could be a 1st-round pick this year. And it's funny, you look at the stats compared 2025 to 2024 in less games. He had 12 tackles to loss to 13, 8.5 sacks in both years, same amount of pass deflections in both years, pressure rate pretty similarly. But if you look at and read about kind of the year, and I know a lot of Penn State people, they would tell you he really, really regressed, which is funny when you look at the stats. They look the exact same. They said he did not progress at all from 2024 to 2025 in the way people were hoping, and kind of had some disappointing moments throughout the year. But I think there's a chance, like this is a weird comparison. Remember and now he's going to be in jail, I think now, but James Pierce was a guy who, coming out of 2024, people thought he was going to be, or I guess I'm trying to think, coming out of the year before he came out, people thought he was going to be the number one pick. And then he came out in his senior year. He had basically the same year as the year before. And everybody was like, this guy stinks. Like, this guy shouldn't be a first round pick all of a sudden. And I think he proved in his first year, football wise, that he should have been. And then he ruined his life. So he's going to be in jail. And, I hope he is, to be honest. But in a different way, the deny Dennis Sutton thing reminds me of that, where this is a guy who people had first round buzz on, had pretty much the exact same year. And because of, whatever people want to say, he has really fallen in the draft. He should have, I think he's helped himself kind of maybe get back into that early second conversation. So he's maybe another guy who he would have his eyes on in terms of a RAS darling.
Yeah. For Dennis Sutton, I think he could be a potential Eagles fit because I think he's a guy. I think the guys that I write this line sometimes, that guys that could kick inside as a pass rusher, those are guys I think the Eagles always like, kind of your bigger run defenders who can stack anchor and shed. They can take on pullers, and then they can kick inside at times. So I think he's a good fit for that. LT Overton out of Alabama is another guy that I think could be interesting with the Eagles. He's just a big physical guy. He played everywhere from 2-eye to 7 technique at Alabama, and I think the Eagles like that versatility. And he's a really good run defender, so he's a good block shedder, can anchor against combo blocks. His production's really inconsistent, and it dropped dramatically in 2025, but I think those are the types of guys that they typically like to get. I even wrote for him in my weaknesses, somewhat of a tweener, a little bulky for a defensive end, a little light for a defensive tackle, which means the Eagles will love him. And then the guy I want to shout out, because it's what I do here, is not a guy the Eagles will be interested in, but he played at Oklahoma, so I got to shout him out, is R. Mason Thomas. R. Mason Thomas is just small. 6'2", 241 pounds. That's 3rd percentile weight, 15th percentile arm length. I would fall off of my chair in shock if the Eagles drafted R. Mason Thomas, because he's a terrible fit for them. But I like him as a player. I think he's a stand-up pass rush specialist. He's probably not going to be a 3-down player, but he's a productive sacks guy 2 years in a row, productive tackle for loss guy, a high motor player, undersized with all of the things that you would expect to accompany that in the edge as an edge setter. But he's just a fun player to watch, and I'll have fun rooting for him wherever he goes, even though it won't be Philly.
So, yeah. Not an Eagles target.
Yeah, absolutely not. All right. So I think that's about going to do it here. Mark, give us your, I accidentally just closed out your list. Give us your 1 to 8 again for the people.
My 1 to 8 is Arvell Reese from Ohio State, David Bailey from Texas Tech, Ruben Bain from Miami, Akeem Mesidor from Miami, Zion Young from Missouri, Keldrick Falk from Auburn, Derek Moore from Michigan, TJ Parker from Clemson. And then just to round it out, I have 16 edge rushers in my top 100 right now, for an idea of just how many guys. And from an Eagles perspective, I don't think edge rushers the spot at 2020 or at 23. I don't think 23 is a spot for an edge rusher. I think the top 3 guys are really the class here of the position, and they're all going to be gone in the top 10. And then I don't know if there's really a guy worth taking over your bigger need in offensive line at 23, in my opinion. If you're looking for the Eagles, you're looking at day 2. And I think they will walk out of day 2 with one of these guys.
Yeah, once you get out of the top, like you said, the top 10, 12, I think it very much becomes this guy could go at 25. He could also go at 50, kind of a pick your flavor sort of thing. And that's the kind of market that's nice to sit in and see what's available sometimes. But my top 8, number 1, Arvell Reese. Number 2, Ruben Bain Jr. Number 3, David Bailey. 4, Keldrick Falk. 5, Cassius Howell. 6, TJ Parker. 7, Akeem Mesidor. And 8, Zion Young. So I think that's going to about do it. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any other final thoughts?
I'll just throw a couple names out there. Romello Height, old man, Texas Tech, but did have 10 sacks. He'll be in my top 100. Gabe Jacas. I don't know how to say that name, but I don't want to. Gabe Jacas. Okay.
No, just I think the J is silent.
The J is silent.
I think it's Akis.
Wow, I would not have guessed that. That's crazy.
I looked up the pronunciation for that because you say that one wrong, all of a sudden the podcast gets tagged with language stuff. And I was like, is that really how you say his last name? And what I came up with was